You probably heard the saying, if you play with fire, you're bound to get burned. But here, you'll end up animating instead. Bad jokes aside, let's get started with our tutorial on how to draw an Animate cartoon-style fire in our beloved software, Arttista. Let's get started. There are many ways to draw flames, but I like this one because it's especially simple. Its basic shape is very similar to a teardrop. Next, a few frames later, I create a second keyframe and change the shape of the flame's tip, making it point in the opposite direction from the first frame. I repeat these two keyframes every 15 frames, creating an animation where the flame's tip gently sways back and forth, almost like it's dancing or like a cat slowly wagging its tail. My animation will be a 60-frame loop, and this is what we have so far. Now let's change the color of our teardrop shape to a dark orange or deep red. While we're at it, I'll also switch the background color to black, so we can see the flame more clearly. At this point, I duplicate the flame using Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. Then, with Arttista's keyframe tool, I adjust its position and scale to create a second, smaller flame in the center of the first one. I also change its color to something between a light yellow and an orange, or at least I like to think that's what it is since I'm colorblind. Ha ha ha. Notice that I'm editing the points of the second flame, so it always stays inside the larger one. I only make these adjustments on keyframes. Then press F2 to interpolate everything again. Patiently, I keep making these small adjustments to the inner flame until it stays perfectly inside the larger flame throughout the entire animation. Now I switch to the brush tool to draw the bright part of the flame. Using the eyedropper tool, I sample the color we use for the smaller flame. Then, with that color, I paint the highlight. Because I forgot to select the first flame before I started painting, the shape I just drew ended up outside of it. To fix that, I select the shape I just painted, then select the larger flame and press Ctrl+J to merge the two. This clips the newly painted shape, so it stays inside the larger flame. And this is what we have so far. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, but this time I'll paint the top of the flame with a darker red or orange to darken the upper part of the flame. This time, I forget to select the flame first, so I can paint freely inside it without any of the brush strokes spilling outside. To create something that looks like glowing embers inside the flame, I'm going to import one of Arttista's default textures, the one that looks like a spiky ball. Using the brush tool, I select the same color as the inner flame and use the texture I just imported to paint inside the larger flame, creating something that looks like this. After that, on each keyframe, I make small adjustments to the texture. Try and keep the animation as random as possible while making sure the embers don't drift too high. For me, the next part is the most challenging one. Using the eraser tool, I create a cutout area in the larger flame. To do that, I draw a shape using the eraser and set the eraser line thickness to 0 pixels, but keep the eraser area fully opaque. This way, we create a hole inside the flame. The difficult part is not drawing with the eraser, but animating this shape in a way that feels convincing. Each cut in the flame should start at the bottom and gradually move upward. For some of them, I animated manually frame by frame. For others, I created keyframes and let the interpolation do the work. The result turned out pretty good. The cuts that move in a more vertical direction are the ones that give the flame a more realistic and dynamic feeling. With just 3 eraser objects, always animated from bottom to top, slightly cutting to the flame and creating angled openings, I was able to achieve this result. If you're getting frustrated right now trying to do this, I understand. I went through the same frustration until I finally got the hang of it. Now I make some adjustments to the size of the inner flame and the embers until I reach a result that I like better. Now that the hardest part is over, comes the calm part. I choose a few moments in the timeline where the flame can spit a little burst of fire upward. At these moments, I draw a small flame detaching from the main flame and animate it as it rises until it leaves the scene. You can do this at different moments throughout the animation and in many different ways, making small flames attach from the main flame. Let's add a few more flames breaking away. Now I'll choose a soft texture with a lot of transparency and use it to paint the glow over all the objects. The problem is that this glow I just painted is static. So I'll use a little trick here. I'll make this glow part of the main flame, then make the glow follow the animation of the larger flame. This way, it will become animated as well. After that, I'll perform a little sneaky trick by removing this glow from inside the flame using Ctrl+X and Ctrl+V. In the end, I have the glow back on top of everything, but now with an animation that matches the animation of the main flame. Now that we have this animated glow with the keyframe tool active, we can apply changes to it that will affect the entire timeline, such as adjusting transparency, moving some points, or changing the texture. It's time to add the final touches, tweaking a few points, adjusting some holes in the flame, and fixing anything that looks a little strange. If you're looking for a cartoon-style texture, you can stop right here. But if you want to add a little more realism to this flame, come with me to the next step. I added a new track to the timeline to animate a few more holes in the flame. For this, we're going to add another one of Arttista's default textures. It's a very strange looking texture, but now it's going to show its true value. Let's use the eraser tool with this texture, add plenty of rotation noise, and also a bit of position noise to make the eraser shape more varied and almost random. You can see here that I forgot to select the main flame beforehand, so the eraser is removing everything, but that's not a problem. As soon as I finish drawing the eraser shape, I select it, select the flame as well, and press Ctrl+J to merge the two together. Now, what you're about to see is probably the biggest trick used in this entire tutorial. We're going to take advantage of one of Arttista's features to animate this eraser. You might remember that when we have a stroke that uses a texture, every time we move one of its points, the entire line is redrawn with a new number of texture elements. This becomes even more noticeable when using rotation noise or position noise. To fix this, we normally use Arttista's freeze function, which locks the number of textures used to render the stroke. But in our case, we don't want it to be frozen, and you'll see why in just a moment. Notice this brush tool object. When I move the first point, the textures between the second and third points move as well. We're going to use this behavior to create animation in the textures of the eraser. Here we can see that the eraser cuts through the fire, but the textures doesn't move, so the cuts always stay in the same position. On a separate track, I create a keyframe at the beginning of the timeline, and another at the end. In the final keyframe, I select only the first point of the eraser and move it quite far to the left. After interpolating the animation of that point, what we get is the textures around the other points of the eraser shifting and changing position throughout the shape. This creates holes with an incredible look in the flame. You can animate other points of the eraser to see what kind of results you get. You can also adjust them so they don't erase too much of the flame in certain areas. And this is what we have so far. Now it's time to do the same thing on the other side of the flame. The process is exactly the same. This is what our flame looks like now, with the eraser cuts coming from both sides. Now, using the pen tool, I'll draw a base for our fire. Nothing too fancy, just something simple. Using the original track, where we initially animated the flame, I use this texture to paint the fire's glow underneath the base. I add a bit of noise to create some variation in the textures. After that, between each of the original keyframes where we animated the fire, I create a new keyframe. In each of these keyframes, I use Arttista's horizontal scale by pressing the X key. Finally, I interpolate this newly drawn shape. This makes the shape rapidly alternate in size, creating the impression of flickering light, which works really well for a light source like a flame. After a few more adjustments and a bit of position noise, this is what we have so far. And now, the finishing touch. Using a new texture, we'll paint small particles in the same color as the flame around the fire and slowly animate them upward. They start out small and end up even smaller, with some of them disappearing completely in their final frame. To create them, you can draw little dots, or use the brush tool and simply click once, then finish the stroke. This creates a single point using just one texture. You can experiment with other textures, different shapes, and other techniques. Our fire is looking really good. I could honestly sit here and watch it forever. I think I must have been a moth or some other kind of insect in another life, because I've always been drawn to light. Now you can have fun experimenting with the keyframe tool, which lets you make adjustments across the entire timeline at once, whether you want to fine-tune the position of the glow or change anything else. I'm even going to try removing the textured erasers to see what the fire looks like when it goes back to being purely cartoon. It looks pretty cool too, don't you think? I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or if you'd like to know more about how any particular part was made, feel free to ask in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer. Thank you for watching, and thank you for using our beloved software, Arttista.